Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Is still unable to work out the final numbers with the Virgil Ortiz side. I feel, and this is my conjecture, I don't know this for sure, but I've been around the block a few times. If Oscar is trying to change the structure of the deal with Matchroom to get a larger percentage for their side, he wants to probably use some of that money that would be extra for them to go towards making Virgil's side whole how they feel like they need to be made whole, so he doesn't have to reach into his own pocket. He'd rather reach into Eddie Hearn's pocket to pay Virgil the extra than into his own pocket. So there's a lot of problems with that. And a lot of people are pissed off about it. They have promised this fight to a lot of people. DAZN is putting extreme pressure on everybody involved to get this fight done. Now, I don't know this for a fact. There's been a lot of conjecture that, and this is not, I'm not saying anything out of turn here. Take a look at the DAZN schedule. They got Matchroom fights scheduled over the next few months. They got Frank Warren and Queensberry fight schedule over the next few months. They've got Turkey, his Ring Magazine events scheduled. Golden Boy has a card coming up on Friday night, the rematch between Alexis Rocha and Raul Curio. They have nothing else on the schedule. My understanding is that Golden Boy, their contract is up and has not yet been formally renewed. And part of the pressure to get the renewal is to deliver this particular fight.
Interesting.
Now, why they would go to the mat over this one particular bout, which is a great fight, I can't necessarily answer that, but there's stuff going on that I'm not necessarily aware of.
All right, two more points.
My radar is up and my nose is smelling.
So, legitimate question. Why would Golden Boy go to the mat over this? If they know DAZN won it, why would they jeopardize their broadcast relationship over a lone fighter, a single fighter? What's worth more to you? Virgil Ortiz's O? Or the budget you've been getting the last 7 years? One would think that a fighter, even an unbeaten one, is a lot easier to replace than an entire network and a network budget. But Golden Boy seem to want to live dangerously? So Dan has been hearing the same rumors that we've been hearing, that Golden Boy Promotions could be on the chopping block. DAZN have yet to renew their existing broadcast deal, and if they don't deliver, they might not. This becomes a lot easier to do now that DAZN have brought Queensberry Promotions and all of their fighters, particularly their heavyweights, into the frame. Virtuoso, friend of the channel, speculated, what have we been saying? Oscar is on a different time to everyone else. Forget about his bullshit 60-40 request, or prick Mirigan's idiotic demand for $10 million to make a Boots fight. They know DAZN is unhappy with Golden Boy Promotions' output of standalone content, and they're running out the clock on their deal. Why get one of our unbeaten guys beat if we're just gonna leave anyway? Dan Raphael stated that Golden Boy Promotions didn't really have much on the calendar, though at the time that interview was conducted, Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios had not yet been announced. There still is Zurdo Ramirez versus David Benavidez in May, what could represent the final shows Golden Boy does on the platform before they migrate somewhere else. The question is where? American broadcast networks are not all in investing money in the sport of boxing. Where would Golden Boy Promotions go? Who would they work with?
With Al Heyman and PBC. Oh, and surprise, motherfuckers. Al and I made peace, and we are united now. We literally can put on bangers all year with the rosters we have here in America. So, if anybody has an offer, you better come in fucking guns blazing, because we are committed to making the biggest fights here.
So there's your answer. As to what Oscar's plan B might be, if they plan on leaving DAZN, I guess it's to migrate over to Prime, work more with the PBC, do more shows together. Those two stables are actually a lot more compatible than, say, Golden Boy and Matchroom. When you think about it, there are actually a lot more fights that you could make between Golden Boy and PBC than Golden Boy and Matchroom. Golden Boy and Matchroom really only have 1 or 2 fights they can make. Zurdo versus Opetaia, which favors Matchroom. Jaron Ennis versus Virgil Ortiz, which favors Matchroom. Maybe Floyd Schofield versus Andy Cruz if Andy beats Raymond Muratalla. Now compare that to Golden Boy making Benavidez versus Zurdo with PBC, Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios with PBC, and maybe Rolly Romero after that, the rematch. That's 3 fights. What makes 4? Maybe Isaac Cruz versus Oscar Duarte, Or Frank Martin versus Oscar Duarte.
What's that, 5, 6?
Those two stables are a bit more compatible. Those are the pros. What are the cons? If you're talking about migrating over to Amazon Prime, it's not like Amazon has been giving PBC a budget, and it's not like Amazon has been kicking out all that many fight dates, so that if it's your plan to go over there...
You're trying to be on pay-per-view exclusively like they are, at a time where people aren't buying pay-per-views.
That's your plan B for Virgil? I suppose that if things don't work out with Boots, and they're not going to, we all know that by now, they would push a bit harder for a Fundora fight. Sebastian Fundora, who's rumored to be facing Keith Thurman, their fight gets rescheduled, if their fight gets rescheduled. But now what I'm thinking is, if you're Sebastian Fundora, you make more money with Virgil than you would with Keefe. Keefe's irrelevant to today's boxing landscape. The man has no buzz. I don't even know why they interview him.
It's easier to sell a pay-per-view alongside Virgil than alongside Keith.
Don't misunderstand me. I don't actually think Fundora versus Ortiz is box office worthy. It's just more box office worthy than a Keith Thurman fight.
So you're thinking they're gonna push for that now. They're not fighting Boots, so they're gonna focus on Sebastian.
Bingo. Not exactly a foolproof plan, but it seems to be the one that Oscar has in mind, and all the signs are there. They've been there. The months of talks for Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios, Benavidez versus Zurdo. Now Oscar coming out right and just saying it.
But you know, the other thing I noticed while Oscar talked about his newfound partnership with Al Heyman is that the PBC doesn't seem to have anything on schedule.
A good number of their fighters are fighting, fighters you normally saw on their shows, just on other people's shows.
While we bounce all these ideas around about Golden Boy potentially migrating over to Amazon Prime, is Amazon Prime still in boxing with no boxing on the schedule? At least not right now.
I remember before his Twitter account got hacked, boxing insider Rick Glacier said that this year would mark the final year of PBC on Amazon Prime. This is when it ends.
What does that mean for David Benavidez?
You guys know what my theory has been. David Benavidez is on the verge of becoming Golden Boy's Golden Boy. PBC has outlived their usefulness for that fighter, and at this point, they don't have anything to offer him. David Benavidez will attempt to become a 3-weight world champion when he moves up to challenge WBA and WBO cruiserweight champion Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. On May 2nd in Las Vegas, sources told ESPN, Benavidez, who is number 7 in ESPN's pound-for-pound rankings, retained his WBC light heavyweight title in November with a 7th-round stoppage of Anthony Yard. Shortly after the win, Benavidez, who has won world titles at super middle and light heavy, announced his desire to challenge Ramirez. Ramirez successfully defended his titles in June with a UD over former world champion Uniel Dorticos. The only loss on the professional record of Zurdo came via UD to Dimitri Bivol when he challenged him for the WBA light heavyweight title in 2022, and he's won 4 straight fights since then. Benavidez, 29, has openly stated he wanted to take over fighting on both Cinco de Mayo weekend and Mexican Independence Day.
He may be able to usurp Cinco de Mayo since Canelo's not going to be boxing on that day.
Though September might be more tricky, and there is also the matter of opponents. Even if by some chance both days became freed up, who would David Benavidez fight beyond the Zurdo Ramirez fight? Because you go up to cruiserweight from light heavy, you're not likely to come back down.
We know that David Benavidez has bounced that idea around, that he'll move up for Zurdo, then move back down for Dimitri, but nobody really believes that shit.
The men don't fluctuate in weight anywhere near as much as the women do. Oftentimes, when a guy moves up in weight, he stays up. They don't normally move back down. And as heavy as David gets in between fights, the idea that he will next fight at cruiser, then afterwards drop back down to light heavy.
Yeah, right.
That's why I didn't view the Zurdo Ramirez fight as the failsafe that David might have. This is a guy who wants to primarily cater to an American audience, campaigning at a weight where there are not that many Americans, and generally, there are not that many top-level opponents.
Cruiserweight is kind of top-heavy. Once you get past Zurdo and Jai Opetaia, the talent pool sort of just drops off after that.
Now, I suppose that David Benavidez, should he beat Zurdo, he could then pursue the WBC champion,
Noel Mikhailian.
if Jai Opetaia doesn't get his hands on him first. with the help of Turkey LL Sheik, that if by the time David fights Zurdo and beats Zurdo, Noel is still out there and Noel still has a belt, that's a fight he can explore, but that is not a fight that you can bill as a pay-per-view.
Not with any hope of selling.
Americans don't know that guy, so why would they fork over $60 to $80 to see you fight him? They might have done that for Dimitri if you would have stayed down there, but you wanted to move up.
There are one or some fights I can think of for David Benavidez after the Zurdo Ramirez fight. Maybe Noel Mikhailian if he's still a champion, or maybe a former champion in Chris Billum Smith, maybe a rough and rugged contender in Ryan Rozicki.
That's a good shout.
And of course, a Jai Opetaia showdown if David Benavidez decides to bite the bullet and take on the monster. He's up there too. So there are some fights, but what you notice about these fights is they don't have much casual appeal for an American audience, and that's who David wants to cater to.
It's the nature of his problem, that he seems to want to fight on pay-per-view exclusively.
Yeah, you and everybody else. Take a number, buddy.
Now as it pertains to the defending champion, Zurdo Ramirez, saying that he thought the inferior Jai Opetaia was next, then came the Benavidez offer. I was honestly surprised when my team first brought this to my attention, Ramirez told WBN. I initially thought the opponent might have been an inferior fighter and unknown in the United States from Australia. Ramirez was referring to Australia-based cruiserweight Jai Opetaia, the reigning IBF champion. Once the full scope of the matchup became clear, Ramirez said the opportunity quickly shifted into something he views as legacy-defining.
He views a Benavidez fight as being more legacy-defining than unifying titles.
No, he's not stupid. That's just the sales pitch he's pitching to us so that we're okay with him skipping out on a champion to fight a guy moving up in weight. I'm always pursuing the biggest fights possible, and when it's all said and done, a Mexican versus Mexican-American matchup at this weight class is historic, something that's never been done before.
Who the fuck cares? What kind of a statistic is that? It's like saying I'm passing a historic turd because I never took a shit in an English toilet before.
I'm always thinking about my legacy in the sport, and this is the kind of fight that allows me to cement that legacy while continuing to make history. The two fighters are set to meet at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, landing on Cinco de Mayo weekend in front of a large Mexican fan base on the Strip. With Saul Canelo Alvarez long associated with marquee May and September dates in Nevada, the bout has naturally drawn discussion about which fighter could emerge as the division's next major attraction in the state. You also have to wonder if they're going to do for this fight what they just did for Garcia versus Barrios. Initially, it was thought that the PBC and Golden Boy made that fight amongst themselves, but as it turns out, Turkey LL Sheik is involved, and it qualifies as one of his Ring Magazine cards. Will this fight also qualify as one of his Ring Magazine shows?
From a competitive standpoint, the matchup carries a degree of familiarity. Ramirez has sparred with Benavidez since he was young, but he's not treating the past experience as an advantage heading into May 2nd. David is a great fighter with a true warrior's mentality. The WBA and WBO champions said he's clearly not the same fighter he was before. He's improved since the times we sparred.
Asked what he made of Benavidez' stoppage win over Anthony Yard in November on a Riyadh season card in Saudi, Ramirez kept his assessment brief. He did what he was supposed to do, Ramirez said. Win.
I don't know what this fight is going to do commercially because, on one hand, neither David Benavidez or Zurdo Ramirez have the drawing power of a Canelo Alvarez, and Canelo's fans aren't just anybody's fans. They're pretty loyal to that guy.
You don't just prop up any fight on Cinco de Mayo weekend and it does what a Canelo Alvarez fight can do. So I don't know what this fight is going to do, but at the same time, because there's no other big-time boxing happening on that day, they might bite just because it's on.
I think David is ducking Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. I think the only reason he's making the climb to cruiser is because he views Zurdo as being more beatable than them. But that said, this is still a good fight. It's still a solid fight that yields potential to be a slobber knocker.
Sometimes that's the way it is. Two flawed guys come together, and because of their flaws, they create a lot of drama and a lot of action in a fight. That could definitely be the case with David and Zurdo.
Circling back to Zurdo and him calling Jai Opetaia inferior, a perspective that likely a lot of people in this part of the world have about Australian fighters.
That holier-than-thou attitude likely stems from not being used to seeing many Aussies competing at world level.
Oh.
Though at the same time, I think the Aussies are going to need some getting used to seeing a Mexican cruiserweight, since Mexican fighters don't normally run that big.
It all requires some getting used to. He knew who Arsene Goulamarian was.
When Arsene had the WBA title, he also knew who Chris Billum Smith was when he had the WBO, but apparently he didn't know who Jai Opetaia was, the guy widely considered to be the best cruiserweight in the world. The whole time you've been there, and you've been there a while, you didn't know that.
That seems disingenuous.
At the time you move up and integrate yourself into this weight class, Jai Opetaia was already considered the #1 cruiserweight in the world. To a lot of people, he still is now, because even though you've had success in your campaign, you didn't beat anybody that he wouldn't have beat.
He wouldn't have beat Chris Billum Smith. He wouldn't have beat Arsene Goulamarian. He wouldn't have beat Uniel Dorticos.
A lot of people still consider him the #1, and it's a logical fallacy to say that the fight with David Benavidez is more for legacy than the fight with Jai would be when David hasn't done Bo Diddley at cruiserweight.
You want to fight him because he's moving up. Because he's new to the weight, you've sparred him before, his name does ring bells in the United States, which wouldn't require you to travel.
I don't think Zurdo wants to go to Saudi.
It's a logical fallacy to suggest that there is no money in a Jai Opetaia fight because he's a little-known Australian and the Americans don't know who he is, but Turkey LL Sheik knows who he is, and he'd pay you handsomely to fight him, like he paid you to fight Chris Billum Smith on one of his shows. He would also pay you to fight Jai.
The best thing Jai can do now, since Zurdo claims to not know who he is to be there ringside and bring your belt so he can pick you out in the crowd.
He doesn't know who you are? Introduce yourself.
Be there ringside the night of Benavidez versus Zurdo, and whoever the winner is, make it a point to introduce yourself if anybody wants to play dumb.